Good morning, LinkedIn family. It's time for another coffee with Bob. And today I'm very pleased to have another new connection with me, Robin Joy Meyers. If you're not connected with her, if you're not following her, and if you're not engaged with her, this is truly one connection that can change your life. So you definitely want to make sure you're connecting with her. Robin, thank you so much for being on Coffee with Bob. I truly appreciate it. You have an amazing background that I think people need to follow you and engage with you on.
Well, thanks, Bob. I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. You're a microgeneticist, genetic person, right?
I'm a molecular geneticist
There you go.
back in the day. Yep.
And what are you doing now? That this is why I find it so interesting. My daughter's a microbiologist.
Oh,
So when
cool.
I saw that you were a microgeneticist and then you're kind of going in a different direction, I just thought this would be a fascinating discussion.
It's interesting because I never admitted to my molecular genetics background until I did my TED Talk in 2019. And that was on the science of loneliness and isolation. And basically, I went into the lab because I didn't get into med school right away. And I was going to go to graduate school because I didn't get into med school right away. Um, and I was the typical people pleaser, and I hid from life. I pretty much lived in fear of myself, I think. you know. So the lab is the perfect place where you can go hide. And genetics is the one part of science that I really liked. And so if you just stay in the lab, you're bound to discover something. And I discovered a gene in fruit flies that, ironically enough, impeded flight. It had to deal with its wing formation. And so I came out and discussed all that during the TED Talk. And now I coach mainly women. I do corporate health and wellness, and basically to drive through life's transitions. And we don't really know what that journey is.
Hmm.
And for me, that just kind of opened up the world, because it really, you do have to understand that life is the journey, it's not the destination. And so we very often have something happen later in life, and when we have something happen later, it triggers something. And really, the science of fear, the science of loneliness, the science of isolation, there is true science behind it. And
Hmm.
the brain science, our brain is brilliant, and it can be molded and it can be changed, and we can change patterns and habits. And I don't think most people even realize that. And so what I do now is help people change, you know patterns and habits, that they realize that they can let go of things that aren't working for them now as an adult, that they just kind of lived with, and get to know who they really are.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm saying that coming from the heart because my daughter is painfully introverted and is seeking counseling for that. And I think that's probably why she became or went into the science field so that she didn't have to be. And she's not even that anymore. Now she's on the customer service side of the equation because
Hmm.
she's forcing herself out to get that connectivity to make those connections. So, you know, so what you're doing in your background and what you're doing for other women, I just find incredible.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah,
So
I can relate to her.
yeah, and so what do you say to people like that? I mean, how do you help them through some of these processes?
I try and remind everyone, one, that they're fine where they're at, right? Like, you're enough. And I think as a society, things like fear and things, we're so programmed to kind of have, just take the word fear, where it's so programmed to be this negative word, and more of an emotion
Mhm.
and a reaction. And so what I try and do is make people realize that it is real, and it's not just put it aside and ignore it. It's more to understand what it's triggering. And instead of saying, I'm not going to deal with it, it's like, no, deal with it, because it's telling you something. So let's pause, let's realize, and frankly, COVID has allowed us all to do this, right? So
Sure.
let's pause, and let's kind of say, so what is it triggering, and where does that trigger really come from? And very often it's something from even early childhood, because, and I'll tell you a little bit of the science, but it's something from early childhood. And it could be a simple comment that a parent, a teacher, a sibling had said, be quiet, or don't do that, or just stay silent or something like that. And it really triggers that introvert in a lot of people, or a pattern that we just didn't even realize.
Yeah.
Because, just the science of fear really quickly, for that one emotion to happen, 5 areas of your brain has to ignite all at once. And in that, the amygdala, which is like a tiny little piece in your brain, stores these imprints from in utero throughout your life. And if you could think of one little imprint, one little thing that a parent has said, and I have 3 kids, so I know I probably said things to my oldest child that I probably don't say to my youngest,
Yeah. Yeah.
but just as a new parent, not even knowing, right? And you just see these things transform. So I tell people to kind of take a pause, like if the house isn't on fire sort of attitude, step back and learn that we really truly have to know who we are, and create mindset and create good habits for ourselves, and stop being on the run.
Mhm.
And so really kind of get to build in, just like we go to a doctor's appointment, just like we set up meetings, set up a meeting with yourself to kind of learn to do check-ins with yourself on a daily routine.
Awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. And you know what? The same is said for, you're a parent, I'm a parent. We had to retrain ourselves a little bit to be able to deal with her, and her being an introvert. It impacted us as a family even. I mean,
Absolutely.
we went through years thinking she was just, she graduated magna cum laude, she graduates, top of her class speaker, all that stuff. So we always thought she was just studious.
Right.
And it
Right.
wasn't until later in life, after she had graduated, that we, fully understood she was an introvert.
Yeah. And I mean, I consider myself kind of that middle of the road. I mean, I can be the most introverted person, and then sometimes the extrovert can come out in me. Rarely, but it can. Um, when I did my TED talk, people are like, "How could you do that?" And if you ask younger self, that would be the last place on earth I'd ever put myself, is on a stage. But now it's almost like an obligation to help other people
Mhm.
find their voice and do that. But it is interesting, and I have 3 kids. I have the same structure that I grew up with. So my youngest is my daughter, and then I have 2 older boys, and they're all so different. And it's like 2 of the same parent, 2
Yeah.
same people gave birth to 3 very different children. Um, but yeah, it's figuring out, like, how did they get that way? And then it's like, probably you've had the same thing. Like, am I sounding like my parents did?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's one thing we all strive not to be, right?
Yeah, there's certain things that it's like, oh, don't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the work that you're doing, Robin, is just simply amazing. I mean, I follow you and I've watched your posts, and I can see that you are making a difference in this world. If you're not connected to Robin, if you're not following her, and if you're not engaging with her, you definitely need to. Especially those of my connections that have daughters. You definitely need to be connecting and following Robin to see what's going on, and in helping yourself. It's an education. I'll say at the very least, it's an education following your post, Robin.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for being on Coffee with Bob. I really appreciate it. I'm hopeful that we can maybe do a LinkedIn Live where we can talk about this in more depth, and have other users come on and ask you questions.
I would love that. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, cool. Well, you have yourself a great day. I really appreciate you being on, and take care.
Thank you. Take care.